The sensors lied to me 3 times before I believed them. That was the first sign something was wrong. The observation array on platform Velchan 7 had never disagreed with itself in 412 consecutive reports. Not once. The instruments were old and tired and honest, like everything else on this post, and they had always told me the same quiet truth. Nothing is out here. Go back to your paperwork. That morning, the 3 arrays returned 3 different answers about the same piece of space, and all 3 answers were impossible. I set down my morning brew and looked at the screen the way you look at a door that is opened by itself, carefully, without moving. The post's navigation system classified the readings as instrument error. I agreed with it. I filed a maintenance request, made a note in the observation log, and poured myself a second cup. The brew went cold while I sat there, staring at coordinates that my brain kept insisting were empty, and my sensors kept insisting were not. My name is Velchan. I am a senior diplomatic observer for the Galactic Consensus, stationed at the edge of the 7th Exploration Corridor, and I have been wrong about exactly 2 things in my 800-year career. The first was a border reclassification dispute in the Dravith system. The second was about to dock at my station. The shape that resolved itself on my visual feed did not look like a ship at first. It looked like a decision. Long and dark and layered in a way that had nothing to do with aesthetics. The hull was marked and scored along its entire length, not from damage but from use, the way an old blade is marked from things it has cut through. Every civilization I had ever studied built ships that looked like their values. The Kethvar built theirs to look like ownership. The Velthari, my own people, built ours to look like questions. This ship looked like an answer. It was moving wrong. I do not mean it was moving fast, though it was, in a way that made my instruments briefly forget how numbers worked. I mean the way it moved through space felt personal, like it had somewhere to be, and resented the distance between here and there, and was doing something about the resentment. I reached for my translation quill, the thin silver instrument I used to annotate formal observations. I held it without writing anything. I put it back down. I picked it up again. I pulled up the xenological database and searched for the vessel's hull configuration. The match came back in 2 seconds. Species classification: human. Category: emerging spacefaring civilization. Diplomatic status: pre-contact. Threat assessment: negligible. I read the word negligible 3 times. The ship turned. Slowly. Precisely. With the patience of something that had decided to look at me. And then it stopped. And the stopped feeling was worse than the moving feeling. Because things that stop like that are not resting. They are waiting. The database entry for humans was 12 lines long. 12 lines. For context, the Kethvar entry was 460 pages, cross-referenced with 17 appendices, and a separately classified threat assessment document that I was not technically authorized to read but had read anyway, twice. The entry for humans mentioned their planet, their atmospheric requirements, the fact that they had achieved faster than light travel within the last century, and a brief note that formal consensus contact had not yet been initiated. The note said they were believed to be a peaceful species still in the early stages of interstellar exploration. I looked at the ship. I looked at the note. I thought about the word believed. My skin shifted color without my permission. The Veltari are chromatic creatures. Our emotional states express themselves through our skin, whether we choose them to or not. The way some species' hearts beat faster when they are frightened. It is deeply inconvenient in diplomatic situations. I had spent 400 years learning to keep my colors stable under pressure. I had gotten quite good at it. My skin went a shade I did not recognize. I had to look down at my own arm to check. Whatever color I had produced, it was not one I had made before. My body, apparently, had feelings about this situation that my mind was still catching up to. I started composing an alert to the Consensus Diplomatic Command. I got 3 sentences in, and stopped, because I did not know what I was alerting them to. A ship had appeared. It was large. It was looking at me. None of those things were, technically, a crisis. I deleted the message. I filed the instrument maintenance request again, with a note that the error seemed to be ongoing. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ship, and tried to remember everything I knew about humans from 12 lines of database text. They were mammals. Bilateral symmetry. Social predators by evolutionary origin. Medium-sized. I had read medium-sized and thought manageable. The ship was approximately 4 times the length of my station. My translation quill was in 2 pieces in my hand. I had not noticed myself snapping it. I stared at the 2 halves for a long moment, and then set them carefully on my desk, side by side, as though they might still be useful if I treated them gently. The communication channel opened before I had decided to open it. The voice that came through was calm. It was not the calm of someone who has nothing to worry about. It was the calm of someone who has had a very long time to get comfortable with worry and has made their peace with it. Diplomatic Observer Vel-Chan, the voice said. This is the UES Relentless. We are requesting docking clearance and a resupply run. We have been out here 11 months. Please advise on your protein synthesizer situation. I sat very still. The voice waited. It was good at waiting. I picked up 1/2 of my broken translation quill and held it and thought about the word relentless, which I had in my human linguistic database. I looked it up. I read the definition. I read it again. Relentless, continuing without any reduction in intensity, unable to be stopped, showing no reduction of severity, strength, or pace. I thought about the people who had named a ship that. I thought about what kind of people choose that word, out of all the words available to them, and put it on the outside of something they then fly into the unknown dark for 11 months at a time. I cleared my throat, which my species does when we are thinking and wish to appear as though we are merely pausing. This is Observation Platform 7, I said. You are cleared for docking. Bay 3 is available. Please be advised that our protein synthesizer is fully operational. Much appreciated, said the voice from the Relentless. Thu. The channel closed. The ship moved toward me, with the easy confidence of something that had never considered the possibility of being told no. I filed 17 new entries in my observation log in the next 4 minutes. I am not sure what I wrote in any of them. My hands were moving, and the words were appearing, and somewhere behind my eyes, a very old and very quiet part of my brain was doing calculations that the rest of me had not been asked to participate in. The Relentless docked at Bay 3, with a sound like the whole station exhaling. I straightened my robes. I picked up a fresh translation quill from the drawer. I walked toward the docking corridor with the careful pace of a creature who has been doing this job for 400 years and is absolutely, entirely fine. My skin was still that color I did not have a name for. I kept walking. The docking clamps settled with a low vibration I felt through the floor, through my feet, up through my legs and into somewhere central, and instinctive that had not been vibrated in a very long time. I had greeted 217 delegations in my career. I had met species with 6 eyes, and species with none. I had welcomed creatures that communicated through patterns of bioluminescence, and creatures that communicated through subsonic frequency, and creatures that communicated primarily through elaborate silence. I had, once, formally received a delegation from the Garathi Collective, which was the diplomatic equivalent of opening your front door and finding a very polite avalanche on your step. I thought I was prepared for anything. The airlock opened, and 43 humans walked out of the Relentless, and I was not prepared. They came out the way they came out, which is to say all at once, talking to each other, looking around with wide-open curiosity at everything, already comfortable in a place they had never been before. One of them, a young woman with short dark hair and a streak of something mechanical and brown on her left cheek, walked directly to the nearest support pillar and put both arms around it. She hugged the pillar. I looked at my junior attaché, Rin, who was standing beside me. Rin looked at me. We both looked at the woman hugging the pillar. I love solid ground, the woman said to the pillar. The pillar did not respond. She did not seem to mind. My people do not hug architecture. I made a note of this in my head and filed it under a category I had not previously needed, which I labeled, Things Humans Do. The captain came through last. She was not the tallest of her crew. She was not the broadest. She had the kind of face that had been through a number of decisions, the evidence of which was written in small lines around her eyes and in the set of her jaw, and she wore all of it without apology, the way some people wear expensive clothing. She had a scar along her left collarbone, visible above her collar. My scanner put it at approximately 4 years old and confirmed it had not been treated or corrected. I looked at the scar for longer than was polite. Her name I would learn in the next 30 seconds, was Captain Nora Vane. "Observer Velchan," she said, and extended her hand. I knew the gesture from the database. I took her hand and shook it. It was the first time I had ever touched a human being. Her grip was firm and brief, and absolutely certain of itself. "Captain Vane," I said, "welcome to Platform 7. On behalf of the Galactic Consensus, I extend formal greetings and offer the hospitality of this station for the duration of your resupply." She smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was genuine, which in my experience is a combination that takes a certain kind of person a long time to develop. "We are very grateful," she said. 11 months is a long time between kitchens. My junior staff had been tasked with receiving the crew and facilitating the resupply. I watched them attempt this. My staff were excellent at their jobs, formally trained, deeply experienced in interspecies protocol. They had, between them, over 300 years of diplomatic experience. They were completely unprepared. It was not that the humans were rude. They were not rude. They were, if anything, aggressively interested in everything, which is a quality that looks very much like enthusiasm from the inside, and very much like a small natural disaster from the outside. Within 12 minutes of docking, my staff had been asked 900 questions about the station, shown 4 separate images of something called a dog, offered a food item called jerky by 3 different crew members, and witnessed the engineer, whose name was Owen Cole, successfully convince a Veltari technician named Sarah to show him the entire engineering bay by the simple method of looking at it, with such obvious longing that Sarah's sense of professional hospitality collapsed. I stood with Captain Vane in the observation corridor while this happened around us. She was drinking something black from a sealed container. The smell of it had reached me from 4 feet away, and it was not a pleasant smell, but she held it with the reverence of someone holding something sacred. "Coffee," she said, noticing me notice it. "Do you want some?" "No," I said. "Thank you." "Smart," she said, and drank it anyway. We stood together and watched her crew dismantle my station's sense of normalcy, with cheerful efficiency. "How long have you been out here?" I asked. 11 months and 8 days, she said. "This is our 3rd resupply stop. The other 2 were automated depots. No one to talk to." She paused. "The crew needed this. People need people." I thought about that. My people are solitary by nature. We can go years between meaningful social contact without distress. The concept of needing people the way you need food or air was one I understood academically. She said it the way you say something obvious. "What were you doing out there?" I asked. "For 11 months. "Mapping," she said, surveying the corridor, looking for habitable systems, stable routes, interesting anomalies. She drank her coffee. "Found several interesting anomalies." "What kind?" She looked at me with something that was not quite amusement, and not quite assessment. A combination of both that settled somewhere in between. "The kind that shoot first," she said. I processed this. "Things shot at you," I said. 3 times, she said. 2 were automated defense systems, old tech, easy to handle. 1 was something else. We are still not entirely sure what it was. It stopped after a while. She said this without drama, the way you report weather. My chromatic skin did something involuntary. I felt it happen. "You encountered 3 hostile situations in 11 months, I said. "We encountered 3 potentially hostile situations," she said, with the careful precision of someone who takes words seriously. Whether they were hostile was somewhat a matter of interpretation and timing. I thought about the word interpretation. My junior attaché Rin appeared at my shoulder. She leaned close and said, very quietly, into my left ear, "I have the hull schematic and the weapon systems catalog that Commander Aldrich pulled from the Relentless during approach registration." "Good," I said quietly. "How detailed is it?" "Very," she said, and then she did not say anything else, which was unusual for Rin, who was not a creature given to silence. "Rin," I said, "is everything all right?" "I want to show you the numbers," she said, "but not here, and I need you to be sitting down." I looked at Captain Vane, who was looking at the window, watching a group of her crew play some kind of game in the resupply corridor that appeared to involve a small object and a great deal of enthusiasm. "Excuse me," I said to her. Of course, she said, and did not look away from her crew. There was something in her face that I could not name, something that had nothing to do with the game, the kind of expression a person gets when they are watching something they have been responsible for keeping alive, and it is, for a moment, only alive, and nothing else. I followed Rin to my office. She closed the door. She put the hull catalog on my desk and stepped back. I looked at the numbers. I looked at them for a long time. Then I sat down. The Relentless was not a large ship by consensus standards. It was not the biggest ship I had ever seen, or the fastest, or the most advanced in terms of propulsion or navigation technology. But the weapons were a different conversation entirely. I had studied military history. My people ended their last war 600 years ago. I had read about it the way you read about a disease that killed your great-grandparents, with the comfortable distance of someone who has never had to be afraid of it personally. I looked at what the Relentless was carrying and I thought, for the first time in 600 years, that the distance was not as comfortable as I had assumed. "These are a survey ship's weapons?" I said. Rin said nothing. "This is what they bring on a mapping expedition?" "Apparently," said Rin, very quietly. I looked up from the catalog. "Do they know how many weapons they have?" "They loaded them," said Rin. "So yes." I thought about this. The Kethvar Border Patrol carries a standard armament of... "I know," said Rin. "And the Relentless is carrying..." "I know," she said. "I did the comparison before I came to get you." The room was quiet for a moment. "They named it after a word that means it never stops," I said. "I know," Rin said for the third time. I looked back at the catalog. I thought about the captain standing at the window, drinking her terrible coffee, with the peace of someone watching the people she cared about do something ordinary for a few minutes. "She said things shot at them," I said, 3 times. "Yes," said Rin. "And they kept going." "For 11 months and 8 days, said Rin. I closed the catalog. I folded my hands on my desk. I sat with the strange feeling that was sitting with me, the one that my skin had been expressing since the ship appeared on my sensors, the one I still did not have a proper name for. "File an observation request with consensus command," I said. "Standard format. Do not include the weapon catalog in the initial transmission. I will write a separate classified addendum. What do I tell them we are reporting?" I thought about it. "Tell them we have made first contact with a human vessel," I said. "Tell them the crew is cooperative and the resupply is proceeding smoothly. Tell them," I paused. "Tell them I will have a full report within 48 hours. Rin left. I sat alone with the catalog and the numbers. Outside my office, I could hear the sounds of 43 humans settling into my station, like water settling into a container, taking the shape of wherever they found themselves, completely at home, in a place they had never been before. One of them was laughing, a bright, uncomplicated sound. I added a new page to my observation notes. At the top, I wrote one question. What kind of people go into the dark with all of that, and come back laughing? I did not have an answer. I sat there for a long time, waiting for one. The 3rd day of their birth, I made the mistake of asking Owen Cole about the burn marks on the hull. He was in my station's engineering bay at the time, having befriended 3 of my technical staff through the simple technique of being genuinely excited about everything they showed him. He had the build of someone who carried heavy things for long periods of time, and he talked about machinery the way some people talk about music, with his whole body, with his hands drawing shapes in the air as he described things. I had come down to check on the resupply progress, and found him explaining, with complete enthusiasm, how a burst coolant line in the Relentless's secondary propulsion system had been repaired with a piece of paneling from a storage closet and something he called duct tape. My technician Sarah was writing everything down. She looked disturbed and fascinated in equal measure. I waited for him to finish the story. Then I asked about the burn marks. His face did the thing that human faces do when they have decided to be casual about something that is not casual, a small adjustment. The eyes changed slightly. You could miss it if you were not watching for it. "Residual heat from the last engagement," he said. "We brought some of it with us when we transitioned away. Plasma dispersal at close range. It was hot." "How close?" I asked. He held up his hand and spread his fingers. "About that far," he said. I looked at his hand. I looked at the distance between his fingertips and his palm. That is a very small distance, I said. Yes, he said pleasantly. Relative to 2 ships, I said. Very much so, he said. I thought about the hull scars I had seen on the approach visual. Long scoring marks along 2 entire sections of the port side. Marks that would, on any consensus vessel I had ever seen, represent a catastrophic near-miss worthy of immediate withdrawal and a formal incident report and possibly a ceremony of remembrance. Are all the crew members uninjured? I said. I had asked this during the medical screening on arrival and been told yes, but I asked again. Everyone's fine, he said. 2 sprained wrists, 1 bruised shoulder. Kira took a knock to the head when the impact wave hit us, but she got checked out, and she's good. I thought about the phrase, took a knock to the head. I thought about the complete absence of any particular distress in his voice when he said it. Do you worry? I asked. When things like that happen. He thought about this with what seemed like genuine consideration, as though the question deserved a real answer. During, he said. There isn't time. You're just doing the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. After. He paused. Yeah. After. You sit with it a bit. And then? And then you go do the next thing, he said. He said it simply, without performance, like it was an obvious fact about how time worked. I filed it in the category I had opened 3 days ago. Things humans do. The category was growing faster than I had expected. Captain Vane and I had developed a habit of meeting in the observation corridor in the early station cycle, when it was quiet and the star field outside the windows was at its sharpest. I do not know exactly when this became a habit. It simply did, the way some things do when 2 creatures are in the same place long enough and find each other tolerable. She always brought her coffee. I always brought my tea. We would stand at the window for a while without talking, which I had initially expected to be uncomfortable, and had found instead to be companionable, in a way I did not entirely understand. On the 4th morning, I asked her the question I had been building toward. You know about the Kethvar Collective, I said. It was not a question. I had found references in the Relentless's navigation logs during the formal data exchange that was standard for resupply docking. They had charted Kethvar space from the outside. They had noted patrol routes. They had labeled several border systems with annotations that, in consensus diplomatic language, would have been classified as threat assessments. We know of them, she said. We have not introduced ourselves. The way she said, yet without saying it. They are the dominant power in the 7th corridor, I said. They have 80 warships and a territorial disposition that has caused 11 formal consensus incidents in the last century. We have managed each of those incidents through diplomatic protocol and careful negotiation. That sounds exhausting, she said. It is sometimes, I said. She looked at the star field. What do they want? More, I said. They always want more. Space, resources, acknowledgement of their primacy. They expand slowly, and they do not give back what they take. She was quiet for a moment. And the consensus lets them, she said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation, delivered without judgment, but it sat in the air between us anyway. The consensus believes, I said carefully, that maintained peace, even imperfect peace, is preferable to conflict and its consequences. That's a reasonable position, she said. Yes, I said. We stood there. She drank her coffee. But, she said. I had not said but. I had not been planning to say but. The word had apparently been visible on my face, which was an inconvenience of being a chromatic species. The Kethvar are aware, I said slowly, that the consensus prefers peace. They have learned over many years how to use that preference. She nodded once, the nod of someone who has encountered this particular situation before, in other forms. On the 5th day, my medical officer came to my office with a report I had not asked for. Her name was Lan, and she was one of the most composed professionals I had ever worked with. She had done first contact medical screening for 9 species, and she had never once come to my office without being asked. She came to my office. She sat down. She put a data pad on my desk. I ran the standard health profiles on the human crew, she said, as part of the docking protocol. I know, I said. Is there a medical concern? No, she said. They are all healthy. Excellent cardiovascular function, high bone density, strong immune response. They are, physically, very well. She paused. I want to show you something. She turned the datapad so I could see it. It was a compilation of healed bone fractures. Old injuries, fully mended, showing up in the skeletal scans as faint lines of denser tissue, the traces that remain after a break has been repaired by the body. I looked at the compilation. I looked at the number at the top. This is for all 43 crew members? I said. Yes, said Lan. Combined? No, said Lan. Each individual profile. I looked at the average number at the bottom of the chart. Per person, I said. Per person, said Lan. My species heals cleanly. We correct injuries with medical precision. We do not carry our old breaks with us. I had perhaps 3 healed fractures in my 800 years, all from the same accident, all corrected within the week. These humans had more than that, each from before they reached adulthood. The scans showed old injuries piled on old injuries. Each one healed, each one a story, each one kept and carried forward like the scars on the Relentless's hull. They repair themselves, Lan said. But they do not erase. They accumulate. She tapped the screen. Owen Cole has had the same right wrist broken 4 times. All 4 are healed. None have been corrected. He uses it every day without apparent difficulty. I thought about Owen Cole explaining duct tape repairs with his hands moving in the air, his scarred wrist drawing shapes with complete confidence. Thank you, Lan, I said. She left. I sat with the scan results for a long time. I added a new line to my observation notes, not in the category file, at the top of the page, alone. They keep going. They do not erase where they have been. They keep going. I sat with that line for the rest of the cycle, and I did not know what to do with it. On the 6th morning, I got the docking arrival alert I had been half expecting and half dreading for 6 days. Kethvar. 3 ships, standard formation, arriving at the edge of the corridor, with the lazy confidence of a species that has decided, over many years, that arriving at the edge of corridors is its right. My staff moved immediately to protocol. I moved to the communication console. Captain Vane was already in the observation corridor when I got there. She had her coffee. She was looking at the Kethvar ships on the long-range visual, with an expression that was quiet and attentive, and completely, entirely unafraid. Friends of yours? She said. A complication, I said. I need to begin diplomatic protocol immediately. The Kethvar will object to an unregistered foreign vessel in a corridor they consider part of their influence territory. Do they own this corridor? She asked. No, I said, but they believe they do, which has been functionally the same thing for the last 40 years. She drank her coffee. She looked at the ships. I'll stay out of your way, she said. Handle your protocol. I went to handle my protocol. I opened the formal channel. I prepared the standard greeting, the one that acknowledged the Kethvar presence with enough deference to smooth their feathers without conceding any actual ground, the verbal equivalent of walking a very tight rope over a very long drop. Fleet Commander Greshtal's face appeared on the screen. He was a large creature, all sharp edges and physical authority, and he wore the expression that Kethvar commanders wore when they were about to begin a negotiation they intended to win. He greeted my station. He referenced the resupply activity. He asked, with the tone of a question and the substance of a demand, about the foreign vessel in Bay 3. I began my response. I had done this dance before. I knew the steps. Then the Relentless moved. Not much. Not aggressively. Just repositioned. Quietly. With no communication. No announcement. No drama. One moment it was in Bay 3. Then it had undocked and placed itself, with calm and unhurried precision, between the Kethvar formation and my station. 1 ship, against 3. It sat there in the silence of space the way a door sits in a frame, simply, solidly, occupying the space between one thing and another thing. Greshtal stopped speaking mid-sentence. The channel was quiet. And then Captain Vane's voice came through on the wideband frequency, calm as her coffee, with no more weight in it than necessary. Fleet Commander, my name is Captain Nora Vane of the UES Relentless. Platform 7 is under our crew's care for the duration of our berth. We are happy to coordinate with you through consensus diplomatic channels, once Observer Vel-Chan has a chance to complete the standard protocol. Please stand by. Greshtal's face went through several colors of its own. He did not move his ships. He talked. He issued declarations and reminders of territorial standing, and references to 11 formal prior incidents, and the weight of Kethvar history in this corridor. He talked the way he always talked, which was loudly and with authority, and with the expectation that the talking itself would do the work. When he finished, the silence she put into the channel lasted 5 seconds. "Are you ready to coordinate through formal channels now?" she said. She was not being aggressive. She was not being threatening. She was being, in every technical sense, polite. But the relentless had not moved. My skin had gone that color again, the one without a name. Greshtal looked at the single human ship between his formation and my station. His scanners were surely doing the same thing mine had done when the relentless arrived. Running numbers, making comparisons, arriving at conclusions. He said there would be a formal complaint. "Of course," said Captain Vane. He said this was not the end of the matter. "I understand," said Captain Vane. He ended the transmission. His formation held for 11 minutes, which is a very specific and loaded amount of time in Kethvar communication, because it represents the interval between a declaration and a consequence. Then they withdrew. Not fast. They never went fast, because fast would look like retreat. But they went. The corridor was empty again. The relentless returned to Bay 3 with the same unhurried ease with which it had left. I stood at the communication console with my hands flat on the surface, and my skin doing things I had no control over. Rin was somewhere behind me. I could hear her not speaking, which was the loudest kind of quiet. Captain Vane's private channel opened. "Sorry for the interruption," she said. "Protein synthesizer still working well?" I had no translation quill. I had broken 3 of them over the course of this crew's visit, and I had given up reaching for them. "Yes," I said. "Thank you, Captain." The channel closed. I stayed at the console for a long time after that, looking at the empty space where the Kethvar formation had been. The Kethvar patrol that replaced them, 2 hours later, took a different formation than they usually took. I had seen hundreds of their standard approach patterns over the years. I knew each one like I knew the steps of a familiar dance. This was not a standard pattern. This one left significantly more space. On the 8th day, the relentless prepared to leave. I had known it was coming. The resupply was complete, the crew was rested, and the ship had a corridor to finish charting, and a mission that did not stop, because my station existed. I had known this. I had prepared for it in the professional sense, which means I had the departure paperwork ready, and the formal farewell language drafted, and the appropriate consensus diplomatic courtesies arranged. I had not prepared for it in the other sense, which means I had not prepared at all. I stood in the docking corridor while 43 humans reversed the process of their arrival. They came through in groups, talking, carrying things, saying goodbye to my staff with the ease of people who make friends quickly and hold on to them loosely, and mean both things sincerely. Owen Cole had apparently exchanged technical files with Sarah, and made some kind of ongoing communication arrangement, details of which I did not ask for, because the look on Sarah's face when she watched him walk back toward the airlock was personal. 3 of my junior staff had, I had discovered that morning, asked Captain Vane if they could be shown the Relentless's engine room during the berth. She had said yes. They had come back 2 hours later, and had been making sounds ever since that I could not categorize. Something between awe and education, and the particular feeling of having had your understanding of what is possible, permanently expanded. I found that I was not sorry the captain had said yes. Captain Vane came through last again, the same way she had arrived. She stopped when she reached me. "Observer Vel-Chan," she said. "Captain Vane," I said. "Safe travels." "Thank you for the hospitality," she said. "Your station is a good one. Good people." She said good people the way some beings say it and mean it, as the highest possible compliment, which among humans, I had come to understand, it was. We shook hands again, the same grip, firm and brief and certain. "One question," I said. "If I may." She waited. "When you moved into position yesterday," I said, "between my station and the Kethvar formation, What were you thinking? She considered this with real attention, not performing the consideration, actually thinking about the answer. I was thinking, she said, that you had been very kind to us, and that kindness is worth something, and that I had the means to make sure something uncomfortable did not become something worse. Were you afraid? I said. 3 ships to 1? She said, a little math anxious maybe. She said it with a slight upward pull at one corner of her mouth. I had learned to read that expression. It was the human face for saying something true, in a way that makes it easier to hear. But the math was manageable, she said. The airlock closed. The relentless, undocked with that same exhale I had felt 8 days ago, in reverse. The station settling back into itself, lighter now, differently shaped in a way I did not have a geometric term for. I went to my office. I sat down. I opened the formal observation report that I had been writing in fragments for 8 days, and had not yet been able to finish. The document was 43 pages long. This was unusual. My standard reports were 8 to 12 pages. I had written 43 pages, and I was not sure I had said the important thing yet. I sat with the blank line at the top of page 44, and thought about what the important thing was. Outside the window of my office, the relentless was visible for a few seconds, as it cleared the station perimeter. Long and dark, the hull scarred and certain, moving away from me with the same energy it had arrived with, like it had somewhere to be and was fully committed to getting there. Then it was gone. The space where it had been was just space again. I looked at page 44. I thought about 12 lines in a database. I thought about a word that means unable to be stopped. I thought about bones that carry their history, and hulls that carry their scars, and a captain who said the math was manageable, and meant it, and had been right. I started writing. The galactic consensus had maintained peace in this sector for 600 years, through a simple principle. No one party should be strong enough to make the cost of conflict acceptable. We had built our entire diplomatic architecture on the assumption that the threat of violence could be managed by making violence too expensive for everyone involved. I had watched a single human ship park itself in front of 3 Kethvar warships and say, in the most polite possible language, that it was not moving. The Kethvar had done the math. They had left. I wrote this into my report and sat back and looked at what I had written. It was true. It was accurate. It was the correct diplomatic accounting of what had occurred. It was also, I understood, only the surface of what had occurred. The deeper thing was harder to write, and I was not sure the consensus had a form for it yet. The Kethvar had held positions along our borders for 40 years because they understood power, and they understood that the consensus did not want to use it. That calculation had been stable, reliable, a known quantity on both sides. We knew they would push. They knew we would accommodate. The push was limited by how much accommodation we had available, and we had always had more than they expected. The relentless had not been threatening. Captain Vane had been scrupulously polite throughout, but she had also been, in every possible way, completely prepared for the alternative, and the Kethvar could see it in the way the ship moved, in the numbers on their scanners, in the 5 seconds of silence she had let sit in the channel after Greshtal finished talking. The consensus had no protocol for a species that was neither aggressive nor afraid. We had designed everything around managing the relationship between those two states. Aggressive species were managed with deterrence and patience. Fearful species were managed with reassurance and alliance. We had no form, no language, no procedure for willing. That was the word I had been looking for since the first day. Willing. Not eager for conflict, not seeking it, not defined by it. Simply, completely, honestly willing. I wrote the word down. I underlined it. I put it at the top of page 44 and let it sit there. Then I wrote the rest of the report. I wrote about the weapons catalog and the healed bones and Owen Cole's certainty about duct tape and Sarah's face when he left. I wrote about a captain who asked after the protein synthesizer and positioned her ship between danger and the people she had decided deserved protecting, without being asked, and without making anything of it afterward. I wrote about the Kethvar formation that took more space than usual when it returned. I wrote about the word on the outside of that ship, the word they had chosen, out of all available words, to put there. On the last page, I wrote a formal recommendation to the Galactic Consensus Diplomatic Command. I wrote that the human species had achieved independent space travel within a single century and already possessed weapons systems that recalibrated several existing threat assessment frameworks. I wrote that they were, in my professional assessment, neither expansionist nor aggressive in their current objectives. I wrote that they were curious, adaptive, technically innovative, and possessed of a psychological relationship to risk that had no close analog in any species I had encountered in 400 years of observation. I wrote that their presence in the corridor had, within 8 days, achieved a shift in Kethvar patrol behavior that 40 years of consensus diplomatic effort had not produced. I wrote that I did not know what this meant for the long term. I wrote that someone more senior than me should think very carefully about it. At the very end, after all the formal language, I added one paragraph that was not formal language. I considered deleting it several times. I left it. I wrote, "When the Relentless moved into the space between my station and the Kethvar formation, my skin shifted to a color I have never produced in 800 years. I looked it up in the oldest Veltari reference texts, the ones that predate the current diplomatic era, the ones written when my people still understood what it felt like to stand on an uncertain edge. The color has a name. It is not commonly known anymore. It translates, approximately, as the feeling that comes when something capable of protecting you has decided to do so. My people produced it at the end of the Cascade Wars, the last text record, when the enemy finally withdrew, and our people understood for the first time in a generation that they were safe. I do not know what to do with that. I have submitted this report to the appropriate channels, and I await further instruction. But I find myself hoping, in a way I am not accustomed to hoping for anything, that the Relentless comes back this way again. I submitted the report. I leaned back in my chair. Through the window, the space where the ship had been was only space, patient and vast and quiet. I did not know what was coming next. For the first time in a very long time, I found I was interested to find out.